Welcome to the History of the Bible, Ep.98, Israel's Turn for the Worse. In the last episode, we talked about the Canaanites and their way of worshiping their deities. This was to give an idea of the type of environment and culture the Israelites were coming into when entering into the Promised Land. This is also why the Lord wanted the Israelites to remove all of the Canaanites so that it would remove the worship of their deities. However, the Israelites would not do so, and because of them not removing the Canaanites, the Israelites would suffer. When the Israelites came to the Promised Land, they were under the leadership of one man, which was Joshua. And before Joshua, it was Moses. However, before the time of Moses and Joshua, the Israelites were led by the tribe's chiefs and elders. After Joshua passed, the people would again be led by the tribe's chiefs and elders. This isn't to say anything bad about the leadership, but it was the way for the Israelites. They were tribes that were only kept together because they were related and had a common belief in God. Otherwise, most tribes would go off on their own in ancient times. And to an extent, the Israelites did the same thing. And the book of Joshua 24, verse 28 says, "So Joshua sent the people away, every man to his inheritance." The tribes went to the land they were given, and it was their responsibility to remove the remaining people within their inheritance. Joshua brought the Israelites together to fight the major cities. Now the tribes could finish the job. But it did not happen. The people would serve the Lord for the duration of Joshua's life and the elders who lived during Joshua's time. After the death of those elders, there was no longer anyone around who remembered the works of God and what he did for the Israelites. This is where the book of Judges begins. In Judges 1 verse 1 says, "After the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, 'Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Canaanites?'" Now, the first chapter or so of the book of Judges repeats some of the information that is written in the last part of the book of Joshua. For example, the battle Caleb fought to gain possession of the land given to him. This is not to cause any confusion or contradiction of the time when battles were fought. It's actually how many battle records were written during that time. The style of reporting battles in the first section of the book of Judges resembles that of an Assyrian summary of battles. The way it was written out in the Assyrian summary starts with a note that happened in chronological order. In the book of Judges, this note would be the death of Joshua. However, after the first chronological note, the events that follow don't always go in order. They were often arranged by geographical locations rather than time. Meaning, the first thing to be reported is the note, then it would follow the next event that happened geographically near the note. On top of the events being based on geographical locations, the descriptions of the battles were often brief, summing up periods into a short description. This made the battle summaries seem static or lifeless, and not many details of the battles were given. It also makes it more difficult to know the order of events that happen. Now, Judges doesn't go on the whole span of the book resembling the Assyrian summary style. It would only last for about the first 2 chapters, and then it would go into the history of Israel. Therefore, when going through the first couple of chapters of the book of Judges, remember that the story isn't in chronological order. This can especially be seen when Judges 2 verse 8 repeats itself by stating Joshua died. However, it is setting the scene in which the Israelites begin to fall away from the Lord. Beginning in chapter 1, verse 1 of the book of Judges, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, "Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Canaanites?" However, when the book starts with after the death of Joshua, it states a new chapter has begun in the Israelites' history. The same thing was written of Moses in the book of Joshua 1 verse 1, after the death of Moses. They are laying the foundation for the new historical chapter that was beginning. Although the times had changed, before when it was Moses and sometimes Joshua, they would speak directly to the Lord for direction. However, that was no longer the case because of the situation that happened on Mount Sinai, where the people were terrified by hearing the voice of the Lord. They requested someone else to always hear the word of the Lord for the people, much like a mediator. Therefore, when it says the people asked the Lord who should go up and fight the Canaanites, they were speaking to the Lord through the mediator. It was not uncommon for military leaders to seek their gods and goddesses before a battle. Often, it was done in a variety of ways, looking at the organs of sacrificed animals, observing the sky, some type of sign among the planets or stars, or it was given by the oracle, who was often a priest or priestess who would receive prophecies from the gods. As for the Israelites, they sought out the will of God, but it was done through the high priest and the tools the Lord had given him. More specifically, those tools would be the Urim and Thummim. The Urim and Thummim were given to the high priest, and they were to wear it over their heart on the breastplate they wore. In Exodus 28 verse 3, it says the Urim and Thummim would be a means of deciding for the Israelites. Communication to the Lord on decisions were often done through the Urim and Thummim. Unfortunately, there's no description of the Urim and Thummim in the Bible. Therefore, what we know about them comes from how they were often used. Tradition holds that they were markers used in casting lots. Casting lots was not a new thing in the ancient world. Often, this was one of the main ways rulers, leaders, and priests would communicate with their deities. Therefore, through the communication of the Urim and Thummim, the Israelites were instructed to send the tribe of Judah to go up against the Canaanites. The book of Judges refers to going up to attack the Canaanites numerous times. The reason it is written this way is because of the terrain of the region where the Canaanites lived, and their placing cities and settlements on top of hills always had the Israelites going up to attack them. Therefore, in the book of Judges, the Hebrew word for going up became the same word for to attack. Returning to what was mentioned earlier, the first chapter or two are not written chronologically. It states Joshua dying. However, the attacks that the tribe of Judah would do next were all done while Joshua was alive. We know this because the battle between the Canaanites and the tribe of Judah was fought by Caleb, as he was one of the tribe's leaders, and the story is also mentioned in Joshua 15. The tribe of Judah was able to drive out and defeat the Canaanites living in the hill country. However, they were not able to defeat the tribes living in the plain because they had chariots of iron. When the people were all sent out to the inheritance that Joshua had given them, they were instructed to drive out the remaining Canaanites living in their land. However, after the story of Caleb conquering for the tribe of Judah, beginning in chapter 1, verse 21, tells the story of the Israelites failing to drive out the inhabitants. From verses 21 through 36, it sets the scene for why the Israelites fell away. The Israelites would not or could not drive the Canaanites out. However, even when the Israelites became strong enough to destroy the Canaanites, it says the tribes just made them into forced labor. They became the Israelites' conquered slaves, but they allowed them to live within the land. In Judges 2, verses 1 through 5, we see Israel's disobedience to the command of the Lord. And verse 2, the Lord tells the Israelites, "You shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land, but you have not obeyed my voice." Therefore, the Lord tells the Israelites that he will no longer drive out the remaining inhabitants of the land so that they will become thorns in your sides. Their gods shall be a snare to you. Then in Judges 2, verses 6 through 10, it repeats the death of Joshua once again. Now, the timeline can be a little confusing, especially when the Bible tells us Joshua died 3 times. Hopefully this will clear things up. After Joshua and the Israelites spent 7 years fighting the Canaanites in the northern and southern campaigns, the tribes were all sent to their inheritance given to them by Joshua. When the tribes all went back to their lands, they fought against the Canaanites in their land. However, not all of the tribes were able to conquer them. This is where the stories from chapter 1, verses 21 through 36 happen. When the tribes were all fighting within their inheritance, Joshua was still alive. It's believed he lived an additional 20 or 25 years after the tribes were all sent to their lands. During the time Joshua and those who fought with him were alive, the tribes strove to drive out the remaining Canaanites and to pursue God. However, after the death of the generation who served along with Joshua, that another generation came along that did not see what the Lord had done for the Israelites. If we remember back to Joshua, the Lord told the Israelites that he would slowly drive out the Canaanites so that the land would not become a wilderness or become overrun by plants and animals. The Israelites needed to slowly take the land so that it would stay tamed and hospitable for living in. This is when the tribes of Israel began to settle for making agreements with the Canaanites living within their land instead of driving them out completely. The Lord condemns the Israelites for making agreements with the Canaanites, disobeying his command. Even Joshua made the mistake of making an agreement or a covenant with the people within the promised land. The only one the people of Israel were to make a covenant with was the Lord. And that agreement had already been made back at Mount Sinai with Moses. But because the tribes were making other covenants with the people within the land, they were beginning to turn their back on the Lord. So because of their disobedience, the Lord tells the Israelites that he will no longer help drive out the remaining Canaanites, but they would become a snare to the people. This is what is seen in the archaeological records. What is found is not a major transition in culture from the Canaanites and the time the Israelites came into the land. Rather, it was a gradual change where the culture of the Canaanites and the Israelites would eventually look to be the same. However, that would come about over time. Hopefully that clears up the timeline of the Israelites and what is happening with the land and the Canaanites. Judges 2 verse 11 starts the beginning of the new era without Joshua and his generation being a part of leadership. But before going on with the book of Judges, there are a couple of stories that happened during the time the tribes were conquering or attempting to conquer the land. The first story that happened, and we will be looking at this, is in Judges 1 verses 4 through 7. Here it is in its entirety. When Judah attacked, the Lord gave the Canaanites and Perizzites into their hands, and they struck down 10,000 men at Bezek. It was there that they found Adoni-Bezek and fought against him, putting to rout the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adoni-Bezek fled, but they chased him and caught him, and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Then Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off have picked up scraps under my table. Now God has paid me back for what I did to them. Before this, the tribe of Judah asked the tribe of Simeon to help them conquer the land. As a side note, 2 tribes of the Israelites would not receive any land. This would be the Levites, as they became the priestly tribe, and the other tribe was Levi's brother, Simeon. Jacob cursed them for attacking the city of Shechem, because its leader's son raped their sister. Therefore, when the land was split up between the different tribes, the tribe of Simeon was given cities that were spread out throughout the land of Judah. It's believed that after a century of living within the land, the tribe of Simeon ceased to exist as it was absorbed into the tribe of Judah. As has been mentioned before in other episodes, the number of troops said to have been in the battle might not have been the actual number of soldiers. There has been archaeological evidence to indicate what the population of Canaan would have been during this time, and it would have been found that having an army of 10,000 soldiers would have been extremely high. Also, comparing the numbers to other extra-biblical records, this would have been a large army. The Hebrew word for 1,000 is the same word to mean clan or head of a clan. This would mean rather than 10,000 troops, it could have been 10 clans or heads of clans. Another thought is that when 10,000 troops are mentioned, it could be used as a figure of speech to mean an innumerable amount. In ancient documents, it has been discovered that writers would use exaggerated numbers of troops to make a point of it being a very large army. For example, a myth coming out of the city of Ugarit, which is a city along the Mediterranean Sea, north of the land of Canaan, has a story of a heroic man leading an army of over 3 million men into battle. This is an unrealistic number, as the total population of the land of Canaan is to be no more than 1 million during this time period. So the numbers we read in the Old Testament could just be that, an enlarged number to show the great strength of the oncoming army, or it's a misinterpretation of the word 1,000 and should say clan instead. Therefore, when the 2 tribes, Judah with the help of Simeon, attacked the large army, they put them to rout. They would eventually catch one of the kings, unknown if it was the main king or the only king. But they captured a king named Adoni-Bezek. When captured, the 2 tribes took him and cut his thumbs and his big toes off. King Adoni-Bezek said he did the exact same thing to 70 other kings, making them eat the food crumbs that fell from his table. And because of him doing that to the other 70 kings, God was repaying him back for his actions. It might seem weird that the king would do such a thing. However, it has been discovered in ancient times to be a normal thing for captives to be mutilated by their captors. Eyes, ears, fingers, and toes would be removed to humiliate a group of people who were captured. And this is just what Adoni-Bezek did to his captive kings. Mutilated their body by removing their thumbs and big toes. If a person doesn't relearn how to walk again, the act of cutting one's big toes off would take away the ability of the kings to walk. Even if they did learn to walk again, they would lose a lot of their balance and the ability to run. With no thumbs, the captives would not be able to hold onto a sword effectively. Even though this would be painful for the captured kings, it wasn't so much of a way to cause pain and take their ability away to fight, but rather it was to humiliate them and prevent them from ever serving as a leader in battle again. Adoni-Bezek humiliated the kings he captured to the point of making them act like dogs who waited for scraps of food to fall from his table. It was also a sign of his power as a ruler and military leader who was able to conquer 70 other kings and their cities. However, once he was conquered, he believed it to be a judgment upon him from God. Now, when it says, God has paid me back, he isn't talking about the God of Israel. It would have been referring to a deity, more than likely one of the gods he worshipped. There is one more event that we will be talking about before diving into the book of Judges. In Judges 1 verses 7 and 8, it talks about the city of Jerusalem and how they brought Adoni-Bezek back to the city after capturing him. In verse 8, it says the men of Judah attacked and captured the city. However, other areas in the Bible indicate the city of Jerusalem was not taken by the Israelites until David ruled as king hundreds of years later. So join us next time as we will look at what happened when it came to conquering the city of Jerusalem in episode 99. Until next time, remember that you are loved, special, and worthwhile.